All right, this is an overdub of a demo video on how to make salt dough that was done during distance learning last year. So some of the equipment you're going to see in this video is not what you're going to be using. This is equipment that was sent home for kids, measuring cups and whisks and those colorful measuring spoons, but you're familiar with the room and should know where to find things. We're going to need a metal bowl, a wooden spoon, some measuring cups, a damp towel later on for cleaning color off our hands, that measuring cup that had warm water, a whisk for mixing some of our dry ingredients together, and then also our ingredients are going to be coming from the recipe. Now, you're going to see this being done on a sheet pan with a mat. That was because we had people working at home on countertops. We're going to go ahead and get this kneading done on our stainless steel countertops. You need to pay attention to the written instructions and the recipe that are provided, not what you see on the video, because they will not match up. But there's going to be a certain amount of salt that's added into the bowl, so measure that out accurately, okay, so that we don't end up running out of salt for this project. You're next going to be adding in all-purpose flour, which are in the bins with green lids underneath your stations. Okay, so go ahead and add in the amount that the recipe calls for. And again, it's not coming from a Ziploc bag. That was a kit that was sent home. We're going to mix this together with a whisk just to make sure the salt is all the way incorporated. Okay, there's another technique that you could use just to kind of get your fingers involved and just kind of fluff it all together. Just want to make sure that's all mixed together. All right, next we're going to have some warm water that we're going to be adding in. We want this water to be warm enough that it helps dissolve things, but not so hot that it's going to burn your hands. So water coming out of the tap is perfectly fine. And follow the recipe as far as how much water it asks you to add. We don't want to add too much, so we're going to add it in stages. When we first add the original amount in, it's going to be definitely a shaggy dough that we're going to mix together with our wooden spoon. You could be bringing your hand in to mix this in as well. Just try to get everything all incorporated. We are going to be doing this mixing in a bowl so that it kind of keeps our mess in one spot. Okay, at some point I do need to grab that dough up and start kneading it together, and it should start coming together like some of the other doughs that you've worked with so far this year. And once I've kind of kneaded that together and got myself a consistent ball of dough, I'm going to be looking to work that and kind of set it off to the side. See if it's able to hold its shape together, which this part does. Now if I take that wet dough and I try to add some dry to it, it doesn't really want to adhere. It doesn't want to stick. So I try to blot it down. It doesn't want to incorporate itself in. So that dough is perfect what's in my hands. The other amount of dough does need a little bit more water. So I'm kind of isolating parts of my dough. And again, the amount you see in the bowl is going to not be the same amount you're making because you guys are making smaller batches for smaller groups. So you're going to end up adding, for the amount of dough you're making, probably just a couple tablespoons more of water. Mix that in. And honestly, if anything, you'd rather your dough be a little bit more wet than too dry and crumbly and falling apart. If it's more wet than it ought to be, all that really is going to mean is that it's going to take a little bit longer for your salt dough rollouts, whatever it is you're making, to dry out. Okay, so these are going to get evaporated just with room temperature water. So that may take a little bit longer process. These can take up to a couple days. So if your dough is a little bit more wet than that, it might take longer than that. All right, so once I feel like I have all the dough together in one consistent ball, if I had two pieces that had to get married together and kneaded together, I will do that. And then I'm going to take and work this dough over and knead it a little bit to kind of develop that gluten, that stretchy protein that you guys are accustomed to for making regular doughs that we bake and eat. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and divide this into several smaller balls. It all depends on how many different colorings you're going to do. Now the video, it shows that maybe I'm going to take these and put them into a Ziploc bag so that they don't dry out. You're going to be working with the dough so quickly, I really don't think that's a necessary step. Okay, so don't worry about getting a Ziploc bag. Just kind of set them off to the side and figure out what colors you think you're going to be adding into this. Now we've been working with the colors all year long. Okay, so you should be accustomed to how these things work and how strong they are. You're not going to be using these little plastic cups and using a butter knife to spread some on. That's how I was getting color to kids at home during distance learning. We're just going to go ahead and share nicely all the different colors we have in class and just add in a drop or two and knead the dough together. Okay, so we've been using our coloring really just for coloring buttercream frosting so far and the meringue cookies, but this will work really nicely in this dough as well. Okay, it's going to take some time for that color to get worked throughout. It's a very strong gel. Partway through, you might actually like the look of a streak, okay, kind of a mottled look. You may want to stop kneading. That's up for you to decide. And like how this works in the buttercream, the pigments in this will actually kind of leach into the dough the longer it sits. So something that is a certain shade, when you're done with it, might take on a darker shade after it's sat for a while. And that's just something you're going to have to work with. Now in time lapse, or as I like to joke in class, these are my hands in real speed. Here's me making a couple of different colors. Some green to go with my red, and I do believe that this was some black. All right, and from here we're going to transition to last year's audio because the instructions that you need going forward are still the same.
I've got this here. All right, so I don't want to roll this out. Very similar to what we do with the sugar cookie dough. Okay, for the salt dough though, instead of a 1/4 inch, perhaps looking for a little bit thicker. Maybe not quite 1/2 inch. The thinner you make them, the faster they're going to dry out. These are going to air dry. Okay. And the more of them you're going to get. The thicker you roll them, the less of these you'll get. Okay. They're going to take longer to dry out. Alright, so just saying, get this big round disc. This may be something that you may not recall, maybe you do. You've done before as a child. Okay, or was done to you when you were a child. You take a big disc like this, you poke a hole in it so you can tie a string in it later. You put a little kid's handprint in that. You let that dry out and you have a keepsake forever. For us, I'm gonna make some stars. Push down and twist. Okay. Push down and twist so it separates. Let's get a couple circles with that. Push down and twist. Push down and twist. And then very much like sugar cookie dough, let's zoom in on that. Very much like sugar cookie dough, we'll just take up the scraps. Okay, to be reused. Very much like sugar cookie dough, you're going to want to take this up and transfer it. Okay, so I'm going to put this onto my sheet pan. I'd like it to be not directly on the sheet pan, just on paper. Okay, you guys could use wax paper. These are not going in the oven. Alright, so again, we can use paper towels. Lift these up, try not to change the structure of that. And then even this round, if you were wanting to eventually tie a string through it, you poke a hole in it. You can use a straw as well. Okay, and with your butter knife, could maybe even write in it H-E-L-L-O. Hello. That's not so inspired. It's alright, let's say I messed that up. Hello? What does that mean? Alright, well, take it like you would with sugar cookie dough, mash it up, start over. Now what you may find is this got a little bit dried out, okay? And so, with my water here, just fingertips, I might wipe it on that side, work it through until it comes to be a softer, more pliable dough. Nice.
So here's another technique that you can do with multiple colors, is to get some of your colors separated out into smaller balls. Okay, kind of re-knead them and kind of check their texture if they've been sitting for a little while. Understand that I need you just kind of using one set of gloves. Can't really be changing gloves every time you change a color. That's why you have that warm, damp towel on the side. So you may have a little color bleed. Okay, but kind of plan ahead of what colors you wanted to combine and maybe pinch off smaller sizes. These are about golf ball size. And then I'm going to look to roll these out by hand, kind of longer snakes, tubes. And then just put them down side by side and try to roll them out such that they kind of weld themselves together. And if your dough's the right consistency, hopefully they're going to hold their shape and or actually more adhere to each other, I should say. And if they separate apart, then you may not be able to do this technique, or you may have to add a little bit more water and start over. Once these get rolled out in this way and you eventually do some cutting, you got to kind of understand that the scraps that are left behind can't really be reused, balled up again, and rolled out. You're kind of limited in what you're doing here, but you might be able to get some cool designs going. And as I said with the water, if something came apart, just a little bit of a drop, kind of like moisten it and slide it back on. It could be enough just that moisture is going to help that kind of dry together. And those would be some leftover scraps. All right, use your colors, use your creativity, play with your dough, have some fun.